Alright, so here we go. We're talking about projectiles, and we're talking about movement in two dimensions simultaneously. So let's review real quickly. If you remember, we talked about if an object is thrown from a cliff with an initial velocity v and is allowed to fall to the ground, we could determine several things from this. We could see v final, the time of flight, or the time that it was in the air, provided we know the height change. Height was given. Then we could say, based on v initial and the fact that acceleration is g, which is equal to negative 9.8 meters per second squared, then we could imagine that the time of flight and the final velocity of such a thing could be found using the gt plus v initial is v final. Now we wouldn't know the time, but this is something we could use to get the final velocity. The time then would have to be derived from the change in height is equal to 1/2 gt squared plus v initial t, and apply the quadratic formula. To get t. So, remembering in the quadratic formula, a, in this situation, a is equal to negative 4.9. Because we're going to take the change in height, since it's negative, right, whatever the height change. Let's say this height is 10 meters. The change in height is downward, so it's negative 10 meters. So then we would add that to the end, and this would be in the correct form. 0 equals half of g is negative 4.9 t squared plus v initial, remember vertical, v initial t, plus height, right? Because if the change in height is negative 10, and then we add 10, then we're just adding the height, right? So the quad form gives me a is negative 4.9, as always. B is the initial vertical velocity, and C is the height. So we should be able to use this setup to solve for t. Plug that in here and get v final. Or, another thing, if we don't have the time, we could solve v final. Provided we know the time, we can plug it in here, but if we don't know the time, we could just say v final squared equals v initial squared plus 2g change in height. And remembering that g is negative and change in height is negative, so that'll produce a positive value. V initial, again, is vertical v initial. Okay? Just a review on determining time of flight and final velocity as something hits the ground, provided we know the initial velocity and the height.